Hi, and welcome to the How to Survive Healthcare podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Thompson-Riviere, seasoned critical care RN turned independent patient advocate. Tune in every week so that you can learn the things about the U.S. healthcare system that no one ever tells you. That way that you can get the most from it and optimize your health outcomes. Now, of course, this podcast is strictly to inform and entertain and should never be taken as a substitute for medical advice. Let's dive right in. All right, welcome back to another episode here on How to Survive Healthcare. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Miss Kristy Shell. Comes to us from down in Florida to share both her professional and personal story about how advocacy has come into her life. So thank you so much for being here with us today, Kristy.
Well, thank you, Kayla, for inviting me. Not a story that I thought I would be sharing, but happy to share it for sure. As Kayla said, my name is Kristy Shell. I am a healthcare advocate. I own Haven Healthcare Advocates out of Tampa, Florida, but work remotely everywhere. And I had a recent experience. My oldest daughter, called me on a Monday. She was pregnant. She was due the middle of August, and she called me the beginning of July, or texted actually to start with, which she happens to be a nurse as well. So, yeah, interesting. So she sent me a text message. She was having some blood pressure issues. And so we've been talking through that, nurse to nurse, mom to mom. And she sent me a text message on Monday evening and said, Mom, they want to deliver me, which was 6 weeks plus early. So almost 7 weeks early.
So really in the preemie area.
Yes, definitely a preemie. My career as a nurse actually started in the NICU. I worked in the NICU. I was on a neonatal transport team. I've worked for insurance companies, been in and out of the NICU actually a couple of times, and a transport team for children's hospitals. So,
and for anyone who's not familiar, NICU stands for Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. So correct. Just like ICU for adults, but this is for teeny tiny babies. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the definition of neonate is less than 30 days
correct.
Old. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So what we see in the NICU is really from birth on. Every once in a while, you see a baby that has gone home, but not very often. And not just preemies, but very, very sick babies. If there's any kind of other health issues going on, we see a lot of cardiac issues in the NICU, different syndromes, just different things. But when you think of NICU, you probably think of tiny preemies.
The early baby.
Yes. And we can do amazing things in the NICU. We can now give babies at 22 weeks gestation, give or take, a chance at living, which is
that's
very
amazing.
Small. Yeah. And a true gestation for pregnancy, as you know, Kayla, is 40 weeks, is at full term, completely full term, a full gestation. So she called me, sent me a text message 6+ weeks early, and I was able to get on the next flight out the next day, and I was there for her birth. So at 34 weeks, you're kind of right on the verge. There was a possibility that she could have been big enough and developed enough that she could have not had to go to the NICU. But we knew going in also that she was going to be on the smaller side.
Right.
So she had a very uncomplicated delivery. Baby actually did great at delivery, but she was tiny. She was 4 pounds, 3 ounces.
Oh, and I assume that this needed to be a cesarean or a surgical delivery, correct?
Nope.
No?
She actually delivered. Yep. Nope. Did not need a C-section. And actually, it was kind of funny because they had induced the labor to bring that on, and nothing was happening. And all of a sudden, she's like, "Yeah, I think I'm ready." And the nurse was like, "No, we just checked you. It's fine." Kind of. And then all of a sudden she checked and she was like, "Oh, we're having a baby." And the nurse actually almost delivered the baby. And my daughter had told me that I needed to be on my best behavior because my personality, I wanted to be very involved. I was like, I wanted to be down there. Like, was like, okay, I will be good. So I was like, I promise to stand in the corner and let them do their job.
Yeah, I also had to have some conversations with my mom for delivery.
This is actually her second baby. She didn't let me go to the delivery of the first one. She's like, I just really want it to be me and my husband. I was like, okay. But this one, knowing that there was likely going to be, more to this, and she definitely wanted mom there for that one. So delivery went well. She did need to go straight to the NICU. So not straight to the NICU. Mom had time to do some skin to skin and to be with her. But you really, when they're that little, you got to really watch their heat and their temperature control. Mm-hmm. So she very soon after delivery went to the NICU, and that's when my two worlds collided. My advocate and nurse NICU experience collided with being a yaya, which is my grandma name. So I will say my daughter and son-in-law are very appreciative that knowledge was there, because the NICU is just a different world. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Kayla, having a baby and, babies, that you get all of the knowledge. And I think as a new mom, you try and soak up all of that knowledge, and you have all of that learning that you're learning, how to be a mom and what to expect. And then you have a NICU baby, and most of that is just completely thrown out of the window.
Right.
It's because it's definitely a different world. And what I was able to do as an advocate in this instance is really just be able to talk them through. And for an infant this size, the big thing for them is they have to learn how to eat and be able to manage suck, swallow, and breathe, because that's not actually something that's ingrained from a very early age. If you're full term, it is, but for these preemies, it's not. And they have to be able to maintain their heat because they're so small. They don't have enough body fat to maintain their heat. So you've seen like an incubator, so in in the box. So she had to spend some time in there. She ended up spending a total of 19 days in the NICU. Mm. And she's done great. She's gone home. She's almost 7 pounds now. She was born July 2nd, so she's a little over a month.
And I guess adjusted, she must be close to term now because we're in the middle of August.
Yep, she's getting close to term, and she's doing great. The biggest thing that I can tell you, that as an advocate in this situation where I was able to kind of walk them through, is she wasn't by any stretch of the means the sickest baby in the NICU, which is clearly good, right?
Right.
But they also, for the parents, for parents of infants at that stage, not being the sickest baby in the NICU, but it feels like they are to the parents. So being able to be there for them and tell them, this is normal. Like, the goal is she has to be able to eat so much and maintain her heat so she can go home. But every day as she's growing, they're increasing how much she has to eat. So then the parents are getting frustrated because they're like, how is she ever going to meet this? And I told them, I stress this to parents all the time when I was a NICU nurse, and now to my own family, like, I promise she's going to figure it out. It's like a light bulb is going to go off, and she's going to figure it out, and she's going to be eating, and she's going to be going home. So, just being able to tell them how the NICU works, because it is a different world.
Reinforce that support when the nurses can't be at the bedside continually, especially when it's not the sickest baby. I know we have a phrase that we use sometimes in healthcare that, like, waiting is good. Waiting means you're not dying. If you're not the one getting all of the attention, usually is you don't want to be that person.
100%.
But it can be very frustrating. And I know in my role as a nurse, I've had to navigate that many times with people. They feel like they're being ignored or neglected. And it's like, well, you don't need a lot right now.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And I feel like in her time in the NICU, besides being that support for the family, and to give them realistic expectations. And the other thing, like I always say, skin to skin contact, I don't know that there's studies on it out there, but I can tell you in my experience that when someone has a baby in the NICU, the more skin to skin contact they do with that baby, the sooner they get out of the NICU.
They actually have done quite a few studies, and it does help the baby with temperature regulation and breathing
Yes.
or the tube, and then the endorphins, it helps your milk come in. I mean,
Yes.
it's the answer for everything, really.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is so good for them. I kept her on a schedule with pumping. She's done so much better with this baby, even than her first baby, with milk production
Oh,
and
good. Because that is
breastfeeding.
not easy if
It is
they're in the
not easy.
incubator.
No, it is not, and it's more challenging, but it can be done. And a lot of NICU moms get worried that they're never going to be able to breastfeed because now we've given them a bottle and we give them pacifiers in the NICU, but again, it's a different world and it's okay. And they transition, they figure it out. If you are a NICU mom, do not be afraid of giving that bottle and that pacifier because you can still breastfeed. It's just another step. But what the big thing that I did and what I felt the best accomplishment of kind of combining those two worlds was she was getting close to that time where we knew she was going to be getting home, but she just had not quite figured out that feeding. And I told my daughter, and the NICU that she was in was an open pod, again, because she was not the sickest baby. Like any of the NICUs that I've worked in have always been private rooms, but this particular NICU had pods. They also had private rooms, but because, again, she wasn't as sick as most of them, she was in a pod. And so they would go over and spend the day with her and then come home at night to spend with their toddler because there was a 14-month at home also.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, she's going to be a busy mom. So the one day I said, listen, I'm going to go over with you during the day, but then you guys are going to go home that evening and I'm going to sit and do 2 of the feedings. I'm going to do the 6 p.m. feeding and the 9 p.m. feeding, and then I'm going to go home. But you're going to have a NICU nurse there feeding your baby. And not that the NICU nurses there couldn't do it, because they absolutely are. NICU nurses are fabulous at feeding NICU babies. But again, when you're not the sickest baby, you're in an assignment where the nurse might have more babies that she's taking care
Higher
of.
priority things that have to be tended to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if that baby is not showing signs of wanting to eat and, eat further, they may shut down that feeding right away. And when you're trying to get to a certain percentage, the more time you have to work with them. And they get 30 minutes. You get 30 minutes as an infant, as a NICU baby, to finish your feeding, but you don't want to stress them out either. Right. But I said, give me those 2 feedings. That means we've fed her from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then the nurses would take it the rest of the way. And she did it that day. She hit her goal, which allowed her to get her feeding tube out. And then I want to say 3 days later, she came home.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So again, that's where advocacy and Yaya combined.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you being there and helping with those feedings and whatnot, because I'm guessing that probably wasn't the first time. And as involved as both you and mom and dad were, I'm sure it ultimately decreased the NICU stay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing. Now, I'm curious, did you have any instances where you had to stand up, speak up, point out something that either had been done incorrectly or had been forgotten, or some sort of intervention on that level?
I have to say, not exactly. The children's hospital that we were in was a great facility. It's a big teaching facility there. The one thing I was surprised at, that although, and what I reached out to my other nurse friends that I'd worked with, is this particular NICU, any NICU that I've worked at, and I've worked at 3 different NICUs between St. Louis and Tampa, we always had to do a 2-minute scrub when we came in. Mm-hmm. As you came in, parents and staff all scrubbed for 2 minutes, and no one was doing that. So I was really surprised at that. But come to find out, there is now, and I haven't been in the NICU for a while as a nurse. So come to find out, there is some research now, and that has kind of changed. So not all NICUs are doing that 2-minute scrub anymore. So that was one question. I imagine,
is it kind of case by case now?
I think what the research is starting to show is that sometimes that scrub can actually open up the skin on your hands a little bit more to allow infection to get in. So they're starting to kind of go away from that mandatory scrub. always hand washing,
Sure.
for sure. But not that 2-minute scrub to go
Okay.
in is what I learned as I was there. And they were really good. Also, they knew that I was a NICU nurse, so they kind of let me, when I was there, kind of have free reign and kind of took over and cared for her. So I really didn't have to, in this instance, do a lot of advocating. Where I found my advocating was more in supporting the family and knowing what to expect and how they could make her transition better. And I think, as I always say, not just with family, but for anybody, when you're having an issue in healthcare and you feel that you need to have an advocate, the relationship just changes with the providers for the better. Not, and I'm sure, Kayla, I'm sure you do the same thing in your practice. As an advocate, I'm not an adversary to the hospital and the providers and the nurses. I'm an extra resource for them as well.
Exactly.
How do we work together to make sure that we're all on the same page? We're all working towards that same end goal. And how do we get there as efficiently as we can and as safely as we can? So, that's the beauty of having an advocate. It just changes that dynamic.
It is. It's extra resources. And unfortunately, I feel we've gotten to a place in healthcare where it's an absolute fight for resources. There's not enough. I mean, there was a nursing shortage when I started nursing school in like 2012, 2013, and it has not gotten better.
and it won't.
The more that medicine, it won't, because the more that medicine evolves, the more conditions that we are able to treat, and conditions that used to be very life limiting, you can now live with. But then not only is that person living longer and just staying in the healthcare system longer, but also their needs become more complex. And the same goes for preemies and NICU babies. I mean, when I'm sure you could speak volumes about the difference between where it was when you started and where it is now. I mean, it's phenomenal the interventions we're able to do to have babies survive and ultimately thrive that a couple decades ago wouldn't have been an option for them.
Absolutely. And we are limited with preemie babies. Like, the lungs simply aren't going to be developed enough any earlier. Maybe we'll have some breakthroughs, but we're kind of at that the youngest age that I think we can probably save them, because the lungs just aren't developed. But what we're seeing in the NICU is not just the survival rate, but how well they do after. Because when I first started in the NICU almost 20 years ago, yes, a baby at 23 weeks, 24 weeks could survive, but there would be a whole host of issues that they would be working with for the rest of their life. And now we're seeing where, we're getting so much better at things, that we're learning so much that, those babies, they can have a I don't want to say normal, because that's not the right word to use, but they can have
expected functioning life. Yeah. I got what you're saying. Yeah. Well, shoo, what an experience. How's your daughter and son-in-law doing with the emotions of everything? Because I imagine that has to be a big role. Nobody really expects to have something like this happen to them. You get pregnant and you expect in 9 months you're going to deliver a happy, healthy baby.
Yes. They've done well. Again, I do. The NICU is a different world, and it's very challenging, and it can be very frustrating in a situation, in this instance, where you're seeing this little baby that just looks perfectly fine, but she has to stay there because she's not eating enough. And so that can be very frustrating. So, they definitely had a struggle with that, just wanting her home. I mean, 19 days is not a terrible long NICU stay. I mean, I've had babies that celebrated first birthdays in the NICU. So, but I think that is the challenge. And then being separated because they had an infant. And so, the challenge of, do I stay there? Do I go home? And I told her, I really encouraged her to go home and get some sleep in her own bed. She's so well taken care of. Spend that time during the day with her, hold her, feed her, learn her care, but then you have to take care of yourself too. So, encouraging them to go home and get a good night's sleep. Like, she still had to get up and pump. Like, I had to encourage, like, you don't get to sleep. You still got to get up every 3 hours and pump.
Sleepless nights, even when the baby's not there.
Yeah. But it was pump and bed and, just really working on their own health then. So, and the silver lining that comes out of it is that she got on a schedule where she was eating every 3 hours. And so when she came home, she was kind of still on that schedule. So, and the first one was not like that. Her first one still doesn't necessarily sleep very well. So she, if there is a silver lining to the NICU, it's that, getting a little bit of extra scheduling and it is sometimes good for them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kristy. Do you have any parting words of wisdom if there is anybody out there who is pregnant? And, these sorts of things I think are always good to perhaps tuck a little knowledge away in the back of your mind because you certainly don't plan for them.
Absolutely. I think the NICU is a different world. I've said it. So don't go in with set expectations. NICU's staff, amazing staff. People don't start working in the NICU just because that's what the spot that's open. People who work in the NICU really want to work in the NICU. So trust your staff, continue communication, and skin to skin always.
Okay. Love it. Thank you so much. Kristy, if there's anybody who does have a baby in the NICU and they want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Absolutely. I own Haven Healthcare Advocates. I can work remotely all over the country. My website is havenhca.com, which stands for Haven Healthcare Advocates. I will talk to anybody. So if you have a baby in the NICU, I always do a free 30-minute introduction consult call. So I'm happy to talk to anybody and direct you in the right direction or be an added resource for you.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Beautiful story to hear. I'm so happy that, it has a happy ending and that you were able to be there for your daughter and son and the rest of the family. What a wonderful built-in resource they had, huh?
Two worlds definitely collided, but it was great. Not that we want to do it again.
Yeah, but right? Once is enough.
Once is enough.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for being here and listening. And I will see you all next week.
All right. Thank you, Kayla. I appreciate it.